Welcome to Roundtable Mindset, the podcast where we seek to understand and share different perspectives in order to grow and challenge our own. And we encourage you, our guest, to do the same.
Each week we will pick a topic to discuss, sharing our own unique thoughts and insights. There will be times when we won't agree, and let's be real, that's probably going to be most of the time, and that's okay. We feel it's important to understand that we can live in this polarized world and still respect one another and even be friends.
Well, hello, and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. You'll hear more from Mahlon in just a minute, but this is part 2 of our conversation with Jeni Kadel. If you haven't listened to the first part, that's episode 17, so stop right here and go back and listen. We're going to ask more questions of Jeni. Mahlon had a lot of really great questions, and so you're going to hear a lot from his perspective, looking for some deeper understanding into the transgender community and what that looks like for Jeni. And this was a great conversation to have. I learned a lot. I listened a lot, but you're going to hear a lot from Jeni about what it's like for her living as a transgendered woman in the middle of America. So we hope you enjoy the episode, and stay tuned at the end. We'll give you some of her social contacts if you have other questions. Thanks so much. Enjoy.
All right. So looking through my list of questions that we have, from your perspective, when you've decided, you're coming out, what does that look like for you? Is that the next day you just were wearing women's clothing? Is there any kind of medical, procedures you're going through? Is there a hormone replacement? Anything like that?
Okay, sure. Yeah, no. Okay. So the process of transitioning is, one, it's different per person, right? Every person kind of moves at their own pace and that sort of stuff. First, you come out socially. And this is also something that I find very, very important to add the caveat in this as well. This process is a little different for children, and I'll touch on that as well, because I know that's a big hot topic thing right now in the news. But basically, you first slowly socially transition. So you tell your family and your friends and things like that. You start to use your new name, your new persona, those sort of things. And I don't know if things have changed, but when I was ready to start taking hormones and everything, to get a prescription for hormones, I had to be seen by a licensed therapist for a certain amount of time. And that therapist had to give a recommendation to the doctor that this is what I need. This is what's right for me. And it was like, I was required to go for 3-ish months for that. And then we started on hormone replacement, which for me would involve a testosterone blocker and a form of estrogen. And I was on that for a while. I did. As I alluded to before, I am a paramedic, and anybody that's in the medical field is the worst patient you could ever have, because we all do our own research and self-medicate on our own. So I do not recommend what I have done in the past, which I will tell you here, but I do not recommend this for anybody. This was the choices I made. But I found some research that showed that the testosterone blocker I was on was not necessarily the best thing for me. And so I quit taking that, and I took extra estrogen. And eventually, told my doctor what I was doing, and the doctor looked at my labs and said, well, if that's what you're taking right now, and this gives you the labs that we're, the results we're looking for, then we might as well just start prescribing you that way. And so we started, that's now what I do, for my prescription. And then after being on estrogen for so long, after a certain amount of time, they gave me the option then after that to start progesterone, which is the other female hormone, because that helps to like finish out with certain aspects of your body, like breast development and things like that. And so I now take progesterone, estrogen, and then and that's it for that portion of my life. And then at some point in time, whenever somebody would decide, they then can go opt to get to have surgeries. So that would be top surgery, which, depending on which way you're transitioning, would be a breast reduction or a breast enhancement, and then bottom surgery, which would be either we don't need to go into the descriptions down there, but
Right.
bottom surgery either way. That they do have the option to go either way. It is more expensive to go from female to male with the bottom surgery, but yeah, so that's how that goes. For a child, and this is very, very important to me to get this out there because of things that are happening in the state and in the media. For a child, they start off first just socially transitioning for a very, very long time with guidance from a therapist or a doctor or whatever. It's mainly just socially transitioning, presenting themselves in the gender that they prefer, using the restroom as the gender they prefer, those sort of things, playing sports with the gender they prefer, those sort of things. And then at some point in time, as they get closer to puberty, the doctors will place them on something called puberty blockers. And what these do is they just delay the start of puberty. There have not been very many, like next to zero, long-term effects of these puberty blockers. So let's say if I started a puberty blocker, I went a year and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I've done my inner lookings. This is not what I want. I'm not trans. I don't want to continue on. I stop taking puberty blockers and I go through puberty like normal, just about a year delayed or 2 years delayed or whatever it is. Again, they have not found any significant long-term effects of puberty blockers to just delay puberty. And so what that allows is for the child to take even longer to make this decision before they start on hormones. And then after they've done that for a while, then they switch over and they start the hormones of their preferred gender. So it'd be either testosterone or estrogen. So then they start those new hormones, and they do that then for a while. And then as they get very, very close or over 18, then they can start doing the surgeries. But one of the big things in media right now is, my 5-year-old thinks that they're Batman. Does that mean that I should go, have him out at midnight trying to fight crime or, things like that to try to show that, or to use vulgar language where we're taking young kids and we're putting them through surgeries or chopping things off of them just because they said one day that they're a girl or something. And that's just not what's happening. That I'm sure there is somebody out there that is in this world that is performing surgeries on children because there are evil people out there. But it is not what's recommended. It's not what's happening in the grand scheme of things. That's just not factual. It is a very long process with several checks and balances to make sure that these kids are not making mistakes that they will regret for the rest of their lives.
So, and to add to that, you said that for you, even to do the hormone therapy, you had to go to a counselor. I assume it's the same with, a young person who is experiencing this. They would be required to go to counseling and do some of that work also, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, they first, like I said, they first start off with social transitioning, and it's all done with the guidance and everything of a counselor to help them and everything. School counselors usually are involved as well, but there's all sorts of help out there, medical help. At least it's getting better, to help them make sure that this is the right decision. A lot of the backlash comes from, there was a study once done of a bunch of people that claimed that they were transgender as children, and then many years later it turned out that there's something along the same lines that I went, only the opposite, where some people internally they're homosexual, but internally they think that they're transgender because of whatever they do in their brain that makes them think that, and at a young age, right? And so they did this one study, and most of the people that said that they were trans as a child grew up to not feel like they were trans anymore. They were just homosexual or whatever. And the study has never been repeated, has never been all the tests that you do for a good study to like publish it and make sure that all this stuff's out there, has not been done with this one test. And it's the only test out there, but it's the only one that I've seen that argues that we're transitioning kids that don't want to be transitioned necessarily. So there's just too many checks and balances to show if they're, unless you're taking them, like I said, to somebody that's super evil out there. And I don't want to say that there's nobody evil in this world. No, there's several checks and balances, because these are permanent. I mean, once you start getting into actually taking the hormones and starting surgeries and things like that, you are making permanent changes to your body. There are permanent things that are happening. My body looks different now, and without going into some form of surgery, my body will look like this for the rest of my life. I mean, I have permanent changes to my body from the hormones I take, and that's a big deal. And anybody that supports this community and provides care for this community understands that it's a big deal, and we don't just willy-nilly let children do this.
Well, and I will.
So I definitely wanted to touch on that, because that's one of my biggest frustrations right now with this wedge politics of using trans children.
Well, and I'm not gonna lie, when we talk about, and I wasn't really quite prepared to talk around children and the transgender community. But now that conversation or that topic is here, it does make me feel uncomfortable. It does make me feel a little bit worried. I think it's the fact that they're young kids. Like you said, a lot of these hormones that, I know that adults are taking, it's permanent surgery, all that kind of, the mental anguish that goes along with growing up anyways. And then you start putting, all these other things that I've heard you had to go through, and you kind of put that onto a child, and then it's just a lot. And so it's nice to hear that there are a lot of steps that have to be done to transition or in the transitioning space. It makes me feel a little bit better knowing that around younger people, kids, there's even more guardrails, for lack of a better word, in that process. So that does make me feel better, but I will be transparent, Jenny. That topic makes me feel uncomfortable, and it makes me want to kind of back away from it, just because,
Sure.
Just because I think it has the words, it has kids in it, and some of this community is still foreign to me, and I still don't understand it, and it is hard. Even some of the topics we've talked on here, I'm looking at, and I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get a better understanding, a better sense. But as soon as we start since we start crossing over into talking about kids, there's a sense of uncomfortability for me. And I wonder if that's where maybe some of this, I think I liked what you said, the wedge politics, because I do think there's a lot of that going on. I wonder if they feed into that or they use that to feed into it, because I'm not in a position to say yes or no. I mean, I know I have my family dynamic and I have, my kids that I would be responsible for. But in general, I just think there's a lot going on when you start talking about kids. And I don't want to keep belabor the point, but I do want to just kind of highlight from my perspective, if this helps in any way to anybody listening or even to our conversation here, it does make me feel super uncomfortable to the point where I want to withdraw from the conversation and I do not want to proceed just because of those feelings that I was telling you about.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfectly fine. I just want to make sure I've said all I really need to. I just want to make sure that some of the facts at least are getting leaked out there rather than what's being pushed out there. I'm not pushing either way on it. It is a very, very sensitive and tough issue to talk about when you talk about the rights of a child versus the rights of the parents. And I don't want to get into all of that. Sure. I don't want to get into all that either.
Yeah, sure.
Because I have children, right? And so I get where you're coming from with that. I just wanted to make sure that some of that information is put out there just to blow away any already preconceived notions.
Yeah, and I can see that in our conversation. So I don't want to, I don't want to paint it in a different picture. I'm just adding my reaction to that because I think that's important too. Because I think other people, I think that's where they're at. And part of what, Jamie and I and this platform that we have, we're trying to break down some of those mindsets that people have, and I think this is one of them. You throw the term child in there, and everybody has a different reaction, and you see the two sides of the court kind of form, and then all of a sudden you're not talking, you're not communicating more, you are arguing and you're fighting, and you have one side screaming at the other that you can't tell me how to raise my children, or the kids have the right to pick for themselves, and it just turns into a giant mess. So I appreciate what you're trying to bring to the table. And again, for me, I'm just trying to highlight the fact that it's uncomfortable. And I think that's where it's rooted, where you start having a lot of these misunderstandings and these arguments and these fights, and all of a sudden the breakdown of communication. And then all of a sudden people aren't trying to understand the other side of the fence. They're just trying to make sure everybody on their side of the fence knows that you're wrong. And so I think it stems from that feeling that I have, which is, okay, we're now in an area that I do not want to talk about. I feel more vulnerable. I feel more, I have my own political views. I have my own religious views. I have my own personal views. And now this is really touching all of them. And it suddenly becomes, rather than a conversation, it quickly becomes supercharged. And so I just want to highlight that too, because in the context of this conversation, I think what you were saying was informative, and you were giving us some of that, some of those details that you're experiencing in the community. And I think it's also equally important to share, here was my reaction to that. And I think that's okay too. And I appreciate that you're able to sit there and listen to me and say, yeah, I see that. And we're still having a very civil conversation, hugely important to us. So I just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, no, it's kind of ironic that, we bring on you guys were, talking to me about this, and you guys were worried about, you wanted to make sure everything was not uncomfortable, and then I go and make you uncomfortable. It's kind of how the turntables.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a surprise, and I like when we can have dialogue and conversations that surprise me. That makes them interesting. And I think interesting is a good place for everybody to live in as much as they can when they're having conversations. It's when you start going down the path of you're wrong, I'm right, and let me tell you how wrong you are, that's the problem.
Well, I was going to say this space too has given us the opportunity to learn something. And I think that is what gets missed when these wedge topics come up, these wedge issues, I guess. The emotions get so charged that then you can't hear about or learn or get the education. It's good to know what those steps look like. So thanks for bringing that too.
Yeah, and I think that it's good, and it's extremely healthy for us to talk about. This is again my opinion, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't like it, but it's very healthy for us to talk about things that are uncomfortable sometimes to some people. It's good to have these conversations because, that, like you guys both pointed out, I mean, right now the conversation isn't being had. It's, well, this is what's right, and just who's louder, or who's on TV last, or whatever. And it's not sitting down talking about issues that make people uncomfortable, make people squeamish. And I think it's very healthy as a society to have people willing to have this conversation, especially on a public platform that people can now listen to it and go, oh, well, maybe I can listen the next time I interact with somebody on the other side, regardless of which side they fall on. I actually really enjoy it. That's one of my biggest things with my political campaign in my life. I actually really do enjoy talking to people that don't think the same, because hearing them out and having those conversations will either help change my mind or will solidify in my mind why I feel my way, because I need to justify to myself, right? Because that cognitive dissonance. So, I think these things are healthy. And
I think you just summarized the thesis of our podcast. So thank you for that, Jeni. That's perfect.
Well, and some of the things that, I'm learning about myself, again, here, I'm going to make it about me, everyone. So this is about Mahlon. No, one of the things I
kind of figured that.
Yeah. One of the things I'm learning though about myself, and I think, if we can put it in places like this is really important, which is I can't learn if I stop listening. And one of the things that kept me from listening growing up and even to my early adult years is I felt like if I listened to the side that I may not align with, suddenly I'm seen as being 100% in agreement with them. And what I'm learning about myself is just because I listen to an idea or I listen to a perspective and I give that person respect and I give that person, love and caring and sympathy wherever it needs to be, that doesn't mean I align with that individual. That just means that I'm willing to listen to their point of view. And I'm learning that about myself is there's a difference between listening and caring and being sympathetic and trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes. And if I walk away and I still have a different opinion than them, that's okay. And meeting of the minds where you bring different ideas together and you kind of talk about them never really means you have to walk away 100% in agreement and 100% on the same page. And right now in our society, I think you have to. Otherwise, you're being negatively perceived as, in this conversation, a bigot or homophobic or whatever it is. And it could just be, no, we're two people having a civil conversation that are trying to show the other one how we see the world. And when we walk away, we may still see the world the same way we did when we walk in, but maybe we have a little bit more of an understanding and insight into that other person. And what is wrong with that? I think that's right, where we need to be. Yeah,
that's one of the things I find ultimately fascinating about psychology in general or any of that stuff. I think what is it that makes me think that item A is the best thing possible, but makes you think that item B is the best thing possible? And why am I so right and you are so wrong in this issue? Even if it is something that in my brain is a right and wrong, even if it's that solid, I find it fascinating and I want to know where it is you come from to get to B that makes you so passionate that that's right and A is wrong. And I find it fascinating to try to understand kind of the difference of it. Just because, if it's a situation where both can't be right, if only one of them can be right, well, how do we figure out which way is right? That's by trying to figure that out. Well, how did you come to B and I came to A? And we're both looking at this and we're both saying these are two different answers and only one of them can be right. So let's break down how you got, if I'm willing to break down how you got to B, maybe then hopefully you're willing to break down how I got to A, and maybe we come up with C, and that's the best answer for everything, on lots of issues. I personally just find it I find those conversations very, very, very fascinating.
Yep.
In general.
Agreed. Well, and I'm glad that I hear you say that you enjoy those types of conversations, because my next question, I think, could start taking us down another emotionally charged discussion. And I'll be honest, this is one that I kind of fell into when I thought of transgender people, transgender community. The only thing I really knew about them is that they were also associated with and I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm really trying to learn all the number or the letters, but the LGBTQIA plus community. So I just assumed that, if I took a step back, I would say not every trans person is a homosexual. But I wonder, when I first kind of was hearing about that, that's the category that or the community I kind of just lumped them all into. And so I think there's a misunderstanding here that I would really like to get your perspective on, Jenny, which is, just because somebody's a transgender doesn't always mean that that person also is a homosexual. Would you agree with that? Or is there some context that you can kind of help kind of expand upon that a little bit? Like I said, I was guilty of kind of lumping everybody together, but I don't know if that's necessarily true or even an accurate picture to paint.
Yeah. So first, I'm going to do a small little definition thing for you, just because, and I don't even think you did it on purpose, but I just want to make sure that anybody that's listening understands. You said the words that you are a transgender versus you are a homosexual. And this is one of my little minor pet peeves, because my grandma was an English teacher, so English and correct use of it matters a lot to me. So transgender is it's an adjective, right? So somebody isn't a transgender. And again, it's the only time I think I've heard you say it. So I don't think you actually think that way, but you just had either messed up just slightly enough that I wanted to at least touch on it just for your audience. So transgender is not a noun. So somebody isn't a transgender. They are transgender person, right? Or they themselves are transgender, right? It's an adjective describing the person. So I just wanted to slightly hit on that real quick.
Well, thank you for that, because English is my weak spot. So just gonna go ahead and say I do not use all the proper, even in my writing, you should see what I write. But no, I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I noticed myself when we were talking earlier, I used the phrase transgendered, and I was like, God, that's like so bad, because that's not the right use either. But I was like, I'm not going back to it. But anyway, no. So they're two separate things. Like we were discussing a while ago with the difference between sex and gender. Gender and sexuality are totally different things, right? You can be male, or you can be a cisgender male, you can be trans male, you can be non-binary, you can be trans woman, cis woman, anything in between any of there. And you can be also gay, straight, bisexual, pansexual, and anywhere in between there. So you can have any of those things, and they're totally separate. And so I think of anything, I'm a perfect example to break down what your preconceived notion was. I my entire life have been attracted to women. I'm still attracted to women. I'm still married to my wife, and so now technically I would be a trans lesbian would be my gender and my sexuality. I do know that there is a big issue within the lesbian community of having transgender people in there and not, and things like that. But I personally don't really care enough to get into that, like to deal with that. But that's the way that that if you look at the definitions of them, that I would identify. Because like I was saying before, I'm in the wrong gender role when I was born, and so I just want to be in the female gender role with the female body and everything, and that has nothing to do with my sexuality. When I was younger and still trying to figure things out, I thought it kind of did. So I was like, well, maybe I'm attracted to guys and all this stuff, and I just don't know it yet. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not. Like I'm not really, And so, no, so that's not, I mean, so they have nothing to do with each other.
Well, and I don't want this to be an offensive question, but it's on the tip of my tongue. So I'm just going to ask it. If it is, let me know. But then with all of the things that you have to go through, if you are transitioning to a woman and you're still attracted to other women, or to your wife, but you're still attracted to women, I think to put myself back into my community before I knew anything more than what we've talked about, what's the benefit then? I mean, if you're transitioning into a woman just to have relationships with a woman, I guess maybe some people would ask, myself included, what's the benefit? Or I mean, what would be the big reason to transition then?
Because again, they don't have anything to do with each other, right? So the fact that when I'm watching a TV show and I see a gorgeous woman, doesn't change the fact of what I feel comfortable in wearing and presenting myself as. I mean, it's the same. It'd be the same, kind of along the same lines of asking a lesbian, well, why don't you just become like, especially like some of these butch lesbians that, cut their hair really, really short and that stuff. Well, why don't you just transition to a male? Because wouldn't that be easier? Well, that's not who and what they are and who and what they feel.
Well, and I think even in that explanation, I'm starting to understand that I see those two things as the same. And I think if I can start seeing them as separate, I think that would start helping me understand, and maybe even I could have answered that question that I just asked you on my own. So I think in this conversation, I'm learning, I see those two things as one and the same. That's what I'm discovering about myself.
And I will add that a vast majority, from what I've seen, of transgender people are what you would describe as a homosexual, right? I mean, obviously, if they're transitioning to their new gender, they would then be a straight. They'd then be straight, right? If they transition to a female, then they're going to be with a male, and so I think a vast majority are like that. But it goes back to like the non-binary and the other things we talked about. There's just as long as you look at all of those things, each one of those things as something that's separate. There's just different combinations of almost everything you can think of. I mean, and that's like I was saying, where I find it just fascinating. There are people that were assigned male at birth that identify as a female but present masculine, but then are attracted to women. I mean, because all four of those things, your presentation is a fourth one. Like, those are four different things, and it's like I mean, I find it fascinating, and that's one of the questions I always have when I find somebody that considers themselves transgender, but then they often still, like a trans woman that still often presents herself as masculine. And that kind of goes back to your same question, where I'm kind of like, what's the point? But then it goes back to, well, that doesn't mean your presentation doesn't necessarily mean that's what you feel like internally. And so, I mean, there's a lot of times I'm sure people ask that of me, because in my day-to-day life, I don't wear a ton of makeup, just because I'm usually on the go all the time. As you said, I'm very busy. So I don't wear a ton of makeup throughout the day. I usually just have on a t-shirt and maybe yoga pants or jeans or something. So I usually during the day, I present fairly gender neutral, fairly masculine, but that doesn't affect how I feel internally and who I feel like I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's starting to, honestly. I'm starting to see a little bit of differences between those. I still think personally I have some more work that I need to do for myself to help me understand what that really means. But even you using terms that you just did, how you present yourself as one aspect of it, is starting to help me see just how separated that is from, who you find attractive or who you're sleeping with. So it is starting to start making a little bit more sense to me. Another thing that I was curious about is, I know we talked about earlier, you were like, hey, I just want to make sure people know we're real people. We water our lawns. I think you said you pay your taxes, which, that's already a step up from some people. But what do you mind sharing? Are there any other misconceptions about the trans community that you would like to maybe highlight that we haven't touched on?
No, I think I think the one thing that one of the statistics that I like to use, and I'm not sure if it's still the same, but this was a statistic I had found when I first kind of transitioned and started on my quest to bring normalcy to this process, was that there are more people in the U.S. that have claimed to have seen a ghost than know a trans person. And so it's very, very easy for this to be a foreign concept to everybody, because most people don't know people that are trans. And you might know somebody that's trans, but you don't know that they are, right? There's just, it's such a foreign concept to the average person. I mean, the transgender population is I want to say it's less than 3% of people in the U.S. So very, very small community. And I think that it gets a lot of attention, making it seem like there's a lot more. And then again, so a lot of people don't know people like myself. And so that's why I think having these conversations and things, I could hear it in your voice how much you were struggling to even ask that question. And, that's a block in your brain, that has been created because of things that you've seen, and this is all my opinion, right? Things that you've seen on the news, or things that you've seen, or just how what you perceive as what might be might set me off, or might make things not go so well during this conversation. And so that's why I like to come onto here, or answer questions like that, or whatever. I'd like to answer the tough questions, because unless people feel comfortable enough to ask about things they don't know, they're never going to, and then they're just going to create their own image of what happens. It'd be the same thing if you went into a brand new restaurant and you refused, or you were uncomfortable to ask them about something that's on the menu, and you're just going to kind of guess at what you want. You may have a good experience, you may have a bad experience, you don't know. But if you were just to ask some questions, it might help ensure that experience is better. And who knows, you might ask questions, and the person the server or whatnot might be very rude to you about why would you even ask such a stupid question, or that could also happen too. But no, I think as a society we have become too polarized with everything, and we're afraid to have this conversation and to ask a question that might be a little bit more uncomfortable because of the backlash that could happen against us,
I would love to dive in a little bit about, where have those difficult spaces been for you? As you've shifted and transitioned into this new life, where have those hard points been? And how have you overcome that, or how have you dealt with some of that?
So as I kind of said earlier, I grew up in a very Christian or very conservative household. We went to church every Sunday, so we were, I guess, fairly religious, I guess. Very conservative, white Christian male, straight, for 30 some years, right? Being as in the majority as I could possibly get. So I would say most of my uncomfortableness has actually come from trying to do the exact same thing that I feel like Mahlon's doing here, is trying to ask these exact same questions and have these conversations with members of my own community now, because I also don't want to be offensive, and I don't want to hurt people's feelings or step out of line. But it is easier, for somebody that's within the community to ask than it is from somebody outside the community. So I've been able to at least kind of, you guys asked me earlier about, some of the definitions of non-binary and things like that. And non-binary in general is just something that I don't understand, right? There's a lot of things in this world I don't understand and that I'm ignorant on. I just lack the understanding of it. Like, for example, I don't understand why a cisgender male would want to remain male. Like, for me, that there's nothing appealing about being a male. That's why I wanted to transition. So same thing. I don't really understand a lot of the non-binary stuff. And so I've gotten some pretty close friends that are non-binary that I've been able to start kind of probing and asking questions and getting a little bit more into some deep stuff, so that I'm able then to have this conversation with you, the two of you, and maybe be that liaison or that bridge in between. I think those were tough. And then the other ones, the other tough place is family members that are, I'm sure, in their brain being caring and just trying to understand, but that are crossing lines and asking about our sexuality or mine and my wife's sex life and things like that are not super comfortable to talk about with anybody, let alone with a family member or something like that. Those are probably the two places that I've had the most uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awkward. I don't know that Uncle Tommy needs to know.
I was
any
just
of that
thinking
stuff,
to myself, if somebody asked me those questions, I would be like, first of all, none of your business, and second of all, how dare you even ask me those? So I was listening to you, Jenny. I was like, I hope that was like an example, and people aren't literally like, hey, you and your wife, let's talk about it. I'd be like, get away from me, you freaks.
Oh no, that's those. I'm using maybe not the direct question, right? But I'm using actual examples of things that we've had that of people definitely just asking questions that you're like they wouldn't have, it wouldn't be appropriate for somebody to ask you those questions. Why are you asking me those questions? And
right. I'm just flabbergasted. Like, I'm just sitting here going, too. Wow.
Well, I was wondering, I know when we had talked previously, that you had said that you really felt like you and your wife's relationship was unique in that you were able to do this together and stay together and build your marriage through that. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you did that, because I don't know that that's typical. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I couldn't find actual statistics on this, because I know this is a question that often gets brought up. I couldn't find actual statistics on how many marriages survive transitions and things like that. I feel like it might be too specific of a search, to find on Google or whatnot. But I don't think I know a single couple that has, I'm going to use the phrase fully transitioned, right? That has gone through like the full process of like coming out to the world and living their true self and all of that. So I don't know if any couple that where one member has fully transitioned and that they've been together through the whole thing. I'm not saying that there's not, that's my experience, right? So that doesn't mean that there's not 1,000 couples out there that haven't. But in my experience, it usually dissolves the marriage, and then they get, then both people get remarried. so I know several people that are married, they're just not married to the same person that they were before. I know several couples that are currently in the process of transitioning, and they are still together right now. So maybe, hopefully there's hope for it.
Yeah.
But it's a tough thing. I mean, for either one of you, we haven't discussed this, so I'm just assuming both of you are, I'm just going to assume both of you are straight for at least this conversation. But both of you, if you are straight, imagine that your spouse tells you tomorrow that they no longer feel comfortable in that gender. And imagine what would go through your life and what would go through your head and how you would struggle with that. And that's a little bit of what I tried to take with my, the approach I tried to take with my wife, was that, she is a straight cisgendered female, that didn't really know anything about this lifestyle or any of this stuff. And, married the man of her dreams, only to discover after, 8 years of marriage, 9 years of marriage, 10 years. I don't remember exactly, because I came out to her a year or two before I came out to everybody. Right. But, somewhere between 8 and 10 years of marriage, to find out that they now want to, go out and present as a female. And, at the time, may want to, go through surgeries and everything. We didn't know it. Neither one of us knew really what the future held. And so it was very, very tough. And I respect that. And I respect my wife for just making the decision for our family, for herself, for me, for everybody, that this is what we decided. And at the time, I know one of the things that did cross her mind was, that this was a better choice than potentially our kids not having a father in their life, because during this whole time period, I know the statistics are out there that it's very high, but suicide was one of the options that I had considered multiple times. So, that I know that was one of the factors that went into her brain about it. I don't think that's currently still a factor. At least I hope not, because that's not anything that is ever considered anymore. It's, we do talk about how this is, we do feel closer and how life is so much better. I do know that my wife has wanted to, write a book or write blogs on the internet or do something to help other couples in this situation. Since we were able to make it through it, she kind of wants to pay it forward and help other people make it through it. So I have a friend that I know that came out to me recently, and I think the main objective with them coming out was not to connect with me. I think it was for their wife to connect with my wife. I really do think deep down that was the main reason they came out to me, was to give a source of somebody for their wife to talk to that understands the situation and what they're going through. So, that's one thing that I know that we both wanted to, shed light on and talk about, is I don't think we are unique in any way, even if statistically we may be. I just think that we worked together to compromise and to figure out what's best for our lives.
Well, when I look back on that, and what I find admirable about it is that it wasn't just, there seems to be a conscious effort for both you and your wife to, honor the vows that you took and try to make, keep your family together. And it's not that just divorce was the only option and that's what you went with. And I think in a society today where marriages almost feel like they can be disposable, you have an argument that's bad enough. You know what? I don't need to take this. I'll go find someone else. I think it's very commendable that both of you are still committed to your marriage and working through it. Because I know some marriages have ended for less. And so I think that is something to kind of commend both of you on, if not that you need it from me, but I do think that's pretty remarkable.
One thing I'm hearing too is, I work in mental health, and it's so important. Community is so very important when there are difficult things and difficult challenges, and it sounds to me like you're actively participating in community, both you and your wife, and supporting others through some of these challenges, and really that just offers and lends hope to others.
I just wanted to get your opinion on something that's maybe not not focused on you, but get your opinion from your community, which is what do you think about trans women participating in women's sports? Do you have an opinion on that? Do you have some insights you want to share?
So my overall opinion is, I'm going to preface this by saying I have a personal internal opinion. But my overall opinion is that every sports league should be in charge of deciding whether or not they do or do not want trans individuals in their league. That's a choice that I think each sporting league should make. And I think that with that, they can also put in their own guidelines. I was just looking up, I think it wasn't until 2004. I think it was in 2004, the Olympics started to let trans individuals participate in the gender that they wanted with a set of guidelines. And that was in 2004, and it is now 2023. And there aren't, I think in 2021 was the first trans woman to win a medal. So that was, 16 years that trans individuals have been allowed to compete in the Olympics before one even won a medal. So I think it's another wedge issue. I personally believe that somebody has taken advantage of the lack of rules and has made a bit and took advantage of it and won a bunch. And that created a whole issue out of it. In Iowa, there is no issue of it. And so I think it's kind of a weird point that we had to take time to pass a law to ban trans individuals from playing in sports that they prefer when there is no issue within our state already. But I think if each league decides to adopt whatever rules and guidelines they feel is appropriate and safe, I personally don't see an issue with that. If the league is too loose on the rules and your daughter or your wife or your sister say those rules are too loose and I don't want to participate in that, then you don't join that league. That's the beauty of the free market is I'm sure if there's a league that's too loose on the rules, there's going to be a league that's very strict on the rules that you can then join. And so, and I think things will get settled out through that process. That's the way I think it should be handled. There are I do understand the issues and the reasoning behind the fear, again, of not knowing what happens to the body and the permanent changes that happen and the muscle mass issues. I do fully understand why people think it's a concern. I also know that since I've transitioned, I can barely open a pickle jar now. the wife has to do that. And that, like I said before, I played football in high school. I played rugby in college. I was an athlete, a male athlete and everything. And so, I know what happens with body mass and things like that. And I also understand that my structure gives me a different advantage in different sports as well. But I think it's been blown out of proportion due to one or two individuals that maybe weren't acting in the best of faith. And fixing the rules within the league would fix the issue more than regulating just an all-out ban.
that seems reasonable. And again, I think you've already highlighted some of the things that I was going to touch on, so I don't want to belabor the point, but I do think it's very interesting, your perspective on that. And so I just wanted to have some sort of question that we could talk about that wasn't just about you, give you a chance to maybe share some of your perspective on something that's outside of just what we've been talking about. So that was all of my questions that I had. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we didn't cover in our conversation today that you maybe want to just kind of leave us with some parting words?
I mean, I again want to thank you guys for having me on and having this conversation, and definitely, putting yourself and asking some awkward questions and things like that, to just shed some light on this. But like I've already said, we are I use the term loosely, but we are normal, just like everybody else, because I don't know if anybody in this world is actually normal. But we don't want to be necessarily painted with the same brush as every other person. We want, I don't know, I feel like there's too much of lumping the trans community into one team, one way of life and everything. And it's easy to do because people don't know very many people that are transgender, but I just don't want people get to know somebody, even if they are transgender, they aren't. I mean, just let people be who they want to be. That's something that I've changed in my life, that, if there is an individual that is different than you in some way, in any way, if it's not harming you, then let them be. I'm a summer person. I love summer. My wife is one of those fall people. She's already trying to get out Halloween decorations here in August, and it doesn't harm me in any way other than the fact that I have to decorate. But let people be who they want to be, regardless of who they love, who they feel like they are. Just people are people, and if it's not harming you in any way, let them be. And the other thing too is that regulations along the lines of what we've kind of already talked about, with trans women in sports, and things with children, and I guess like bathroom laws and things like that. Regulation is not always the best way to solve issues and concerns with things like that.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that you just said there that we could probably have another episode on. So
yeah, of course,
I appreciate all of that. And I know Jamie would also like me to convey that she's very appreciative of you coming on just as much as I am, and giving us this opportunity to ask these questions. And you're right. Some of these were, trying to be respectful. I didn't want to rub your generosity of coming on and being open with us in your face. So I was wanting to really make sure these questions were respectful. And so to say thank you just seems like it's a little bit underwhelming. What you were able to do for us and come on here and have those conversations. I mean, if I put myself in your shoes, I would think I would start feeling like a carnival freak show. And that was not our intention. And I think what you were able to give us in this dialogue was some of those awarenesses, and gives us an opportunity to ask some of those questions that we are like, we're not supposed to ask, but you're giving us the opportunity to do that. So very much appreciated on our end. And it was a pleasure having you on here, and good luck with your campaign and with the other things that you have coming on in your life. But it was a pleasure to get to know you more and to have this time with you. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think, I think if you guys ever decide, in a couple of years or whatnot, to do an additional part to this, a follow up as things have become more comfortable or society has changed, I think that would be a benefit as well too, if you guys would be.
You can't see it, but Jamie's giving me a big thumbs up, and I agree. I think we would love to have you come back on and, revisit this issue, or even talk about something different. You seem like you have great insights, and I just think you would be awesome to come on for maybe another episode. So we will definitely take you up on that offer.
Yeah. Well, I'm right on all the issues that I'm passionate about. I'm absolutely right on them. So you guys want that?
So you and I are going to get along just swimmingly in upcoming future episodes because we'll have a lot to talk about. But no, I love the humor. I love it. Okay. We have taken enough of your time. Thank you again.
Awesome.
We will speak to you soon. And to everybody listening, hope you enjoyed our conversation with Jeni, and we will see you again on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Roundtable Mindset. It was a great conversation with Jeni, and we sure enjoyed visiting with her. We have a few ways that you can reach Jeni if you have more questions or would like to reach out to her. She spells her name Jeni, and her last name is Kadel. We'll have these posted in the show notes also if you're interested. But you can reach her at her email address, jennyforiowa@gmail.com. You can also find her on Facebook at Jeni Kadel for Altoona, or on her website at jennyforiowa.com. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. This podcast was recorded and edited by Jamie and Mahlon. Music by Famous Cats. If you have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please email us at roundtablemindset@gmail.com. Text or call us at 402-819-8999, or join the conversation on Facebook at Roundtable Mindset Podcast.
And never miss a new episode by making sure you like, subscribe, and share wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being our guest today. See you next time at the Roundtable. And remember, your opinions and perspectives matter and are appreciated, but might not always be shared by others, and that's okay.